welcome to our second workshop. My name's Garrett. I'm the founder of Ambition and Motion. I'm so happy, I'm so excited, I'm so grateful to have you here for our second workshop. I am pumped for you to experience our guest speaker later on this evening. But before we get started, I want to touch up on a couple of quick points. So you are starting your mentor relationship. That is awesome. Hopefully you've had your first conversation. I'd love to learn about it. Post maybe about some of the key talking points that you've had for your first meeting in the comment section. Would love to learn about how that first meeting has gone. But yeah, this workshop's all about how to network in a genuine way and really make the most out of it. This workshop should be about an hour long. As a reminder, I'm going to ask you 3 questions during the duration of this workshop. Once we have asked those questions, I'll expect you to answer them. That's how you get credit for participating and being here at the workshops. I'm really excited for you to experience our guest speaker tonight. I'm really excited to dive into this. Now, this is what's really key. I mean, genuine networking is such a pivotal component to building rapport, to getting job offers, to getting promotions. Really, if you can hone this skill, if you can hone this ability, you will be set professionally, because ultimately, at the end of the day, your hard skills, that being your ability to crunch numbers, to do some form of engineering, to do some form of science, like all those things are pretty good. They're very easy to measure. So it's very clear whether or not you are better or worse than somebody on a hard skill. But your soft skills are much more difficult to measure. But those soft skills are really what's going to set you apart. I mean, as they say, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. And this is the workshop about how you can know more people and have a stronger bond with them, because then it goes to your reputation. Because if you have a reputation for treating people like garbage, you're not going to have a great reputation. People are going to want to help connect you with other people. If you come in with low energy, if you come in with a bad state, if you come in talking trash about other people, you're not going to put yourself in a good position. And so I want to be very clear. When it comes to networking, when it comes to building a relationship, it is not all about the transaction. If you're coming into a networking situation, you're thinking to yourself, what is in it for me? You are not going to have a positive outcome. I promise you on that. I really want to be clear. It's not all about landing the job or the internship. Sometimes it's about building the relationship and then playing the long game, because ultimately that may turn into an opportunity because they built a rapport with you. But if you burn them, or if you make them feel like you are using them to get to a location that you would like to be, they can smell that on you. They can smell it from a mile away. And that is not great. As they say, desperation reeks. You do not want to be desperate. You don't want to be perceived as someone that's a user or a taker. You want to be a giver. You want to be someone who gives energy to relationships. The first place to start is being genuine with how you talk to people and how you build rapport with people. Now, this is something we talked about last time, but it is so important, and that is the 3 keys to success in this program. That is honing your strategy, your story, and your state. As we've said before, your state is most important. So physically, how are you? Physically, what is going on with your world? Physically, I don't care what is happening. If you recently broke up with your significant other, if your dog just died, if you got some bad news, I don't care what's going on. If you get up, if you shake it out, if you let it loose, you will get yourself into a positive state. So I want to challenge you to do that right now. I want you to get up, and I want you to shake it loose. I want you to scream at the top of your lungs. Just go, yeah, just let it out, let it loose, let it go. Because what you're doing is you're releasing blood to your brain. You're releasing endorphins. You're getting yourself into a state conducive for retaining information. If you're just sitting there on a couch or in a chair in a slumped over position, your likelihood of retaining any of the information we talk about tonight is severely diminished. But if you come in standing up, moving around, getting your blood flowing, you are much more likely to retain this information. Have you ever found it difficult in a classroom setting to remember what your professor says if you've been sitting for 3 hours? That's why 3-hour lectures really struggle to work. They're not very effective because people are not moving around. Your brain needs blood to retain information. So get up, get moving, get out, get loose. Now, the second key is your story. What is the story you tell yourself for why you will or will not be successful? I promise you right now, you will achieve up to the goals that you set for yourself in life and no higher. So you might as well shoot for the stars and land on the moon than shoot for the moon and end up in nowhere. Because if you are not focused about where you want to be, or really having a big, hairy, crazy, audacious goal for yourself, what are you doing? Like, are you just saying to yourself, like, I'm cool with winding up short, with, settling down and just settling for everything in my life? If that's the case, this program's not for you. I can tell you that right now. This program's not for you if you're trying to settle. But if you're someone that wants to go for it, if you want to go big, if you want to go out there for the opportunities that you want to see in your life, this program is absolutely for you. Let this program be a springboard. Let your mentor be a Sherpa that's guiding you up this mountain of life and success and help you get to where you want to be. This is someone who wants to guide you, that wants to help you. They wouldn't have signed up for this program if they weren't interested in seeing you succeed. So I want to be very clear with you. What is the story for why you will be successful? Understand that, hone it, be prepared. In fact, I would challenge you to write this down. Write it on a piece of paper. It's more likely to stick in your mind if you write it on a piece of paper of where you want to be. Stick it up on your wall. Stick it up on your desk. Stick it up on your dresser. Stick it up on your mirror. Something that's going to remind you of where you want to be in 1 month, 3 months, 1 year from now. That will help you set the target of where you want to go. Because if you don't set these goals, you're going to be on a path that's got really no clear outcome of where you want to go. So the last part is your strategy. What are you going to do to set yourself apart? Now, when it comes to strategies, I'm a big believer in routines. When I say routines, I mean literally getting into a daily habit that you can practice regularly so then you can be better at a skill. We think about habits sometimes in a negative light because we think about people just being addicted to bad actions, but I believe that habits can also be attributed in a positive light as well. What is a positive habit you can get into to help you build more genuine relationships? I believe one thing you can do is to be intentional about having an informational interview every single week with a new person, with a new professional in your field. You can leverage LinkedIn. You could go to a professor's office hours. You could talk to a friend of yours whose parent works in the field that you're interested in working towards, or a family friend that you know works in the field that you're interested in working towards. If you set up one informational interview every single week, and by an informational interview, I want to be very clear. This is a conversation. This isn't an interview. You're not trying to get a job from this person. You're just trying to get knowledge about what this work is like. Set up one of those a week. I can promise you they're going to start making introductions for you. They're going to start helping you get to where you want to be. By the way, if your goals change over time, that's okay. That's totally okay. You can share with them how your goals have changed. They're going to want to keep helping you over time. I'll give you a perfect example of this. As an entrepreneur, I set goals all the time. I have a board of mentors. I literally have about 50 to 100 mentors that I send once every 3 months an update of what's going on with the business. Here's the thing though, I've pivoted this business many, many times. Now, initially when I first got started, I was thinking to myself like, oh, well, they're my mentors. Like, if I tell them that I've pivoted, will they think I'm a total failure? Will they not want to help me anymore? What I found is that is absolutely not the case. They're always there to support me. Mentors that have been with me for 5+ years still give me guidance, still help make introductions, still help me out and support me as my mission has grown, as my goals have grown. That is the nature of mentoring relationships. That is the nature of relationships in general. You should keep your network up to date with what is going on in your world because they will want to see you succeed. But the key is that you ask them for something specific. When I meet with my mentors or when I send them an email, I ask for something very, very specific. I don't say, hey, if you know anybody in XYZ space, if you could introduce me, would love that. Why? Because it's not at the top of their mind. What I'll do is I'll physically go onto their LinkedIn profile, look at who they're connected with and say, hey, I noticed that you're connected with Jane Doe, John Doe, Shelby Doe, and Jenny Doe. I know that you may not be connected with all 4 of those people, but if you are connected with one of them, would you mind introducing me? Here's an email template that you could copy and paste to introduce me. Now I've made it extremely specific and easy for them to take an action step to help me out. And that is how you can continue to grow your relationships, your network, and build rapport with people. And just keep them in the loop of what's going on in your world. So I just want to be very clear. It's about building genuine relationships. And it's about when you're building those genuine relationships and then you're asking them for introductions or connecting with more people through those relationships, being very specific and making it as easy as possible for them to help you out. I really want to stress this. It's so important. Genuine networking. If you can take anything from this whole program, if it's genuine networking, and by genuine networking, I mean really listening, taking an active and keen interest in who you are speaking with, you are going to be set. You're going to be in a great position. Because at the end of the day, it's not your elevator pitch. It's not going to be anything about you that makes someone interested in you. It's going to be about your ability to listen to them. In fact, I can tell you multiple times where I didn't say a word in a conversation. I just nodded my head yes and asked questions about things that somebody else has said. And at the end of the conversation, whether that be 30 minutes or 60 minutes long, they said, man, Garrett, you are such a great conversationalist. Or, gosh, I feel like I just had such a great conversation with you. And the funniest thing about it is I didn't actually say a word. The point is this: people love to talk about themselves Why? Because people are really interested in things that they're interested in. People wouldn't choose to spend the time that they have on this earth in the way that they did unless they thought it was the most optimum way of spending their time. Therefore, things that interest them, things that they choose to spend their time on, are things that interest them and ultimately make you interesting to them because you've taken an interest in those actions and activities. I hope that makes sense. If you want to rewatch that, take that back 30 seconds because I think it's really important. People ultimately, at the end of the day, people care about themselves. People care about things that they are interested in because they've chosen to spend the time that they have on those tasks. So with that said, I'm excited to jump in to our guest speaker this evening. Really, the whole point of this workshop is about genuine networking. By the way, if you have not connected with me on LinkedIn, please do. I'll add you to our LinkedIn group where we discuss different topics and you can add different topics, ask any questions, and expand us to our entire Ambition in Motion network. Connect with me. I'll add you to the group. But yeah, I'm so excited to get started. Let's jump into our guest speaker this evening. Hey everybody, welcome to our workshop this evening. I'm so excited to jump in on the topic on how to network in a genuine way. I think this is a really critical topic because as students in COVID, there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of things to consider. There's a lot of differences between the normal ways we would normally go about networking that we are going to have to adapt to because of the circumstances we are in. But there are also incredible opportunities. It is really just our job to take advantage of them. But really, when it comes to taking advantage of them, it means networking in a genuine way, not in a transactional way. It doesn't mean go up to somebody and expect them to give you a job or an internship, but more or less coming into this meeting, this conversation with the mindset that you are here to provide value to another person. We've got an incredible guest with us here this evening. We've got Phil Boyer. Phil is the president and CEO of Instant2290.com, where he has created a software for businesses in logistics and trucking that makes it easier for them to file their taxes. Phil's recipe for success is to love more, live more, learn more, and risk more. Phil, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Garrett. I love what you're doing here, and I love what you're doing for the students. I think this is an awesome topic. I have 2 students of my own who have recently graduated from university, and one of the biggest issues, right? You're immediately graduated with your degree and all your knowledge, and you're ready to go. And unless you had a program that offered an internship or some program that got you into your first job, which isn't that common, then you're looking for a job, and everything you run into is, we need 5 years of experience. And every college student asks, how am I supposed to get experience if I can't get a job? So it really comes down to who you know, not what you know, especially in that first job. And I'll tell you one other thing that I've learned and encountered even in my own career, but I've seen it as a hiring manager. I've hired this way. I've seen a lot of other hiring managers. When you see a job posted that says you need 5 years of experience in XYZ, many times a year of experience is enough. These people are paying attention. You work for this company doing this kind of thing, using these kinds of tools, technology, whatever, they pay attention. So it's getting that first job, and that networking is definitely important.
I think that there's actually some data from the Journal for Vocational Behaviors where they've actually cited information that people, I think there's gaps between men and women. I think for men, if you've got 40% of the prerequisites on the job listing, you are just as likely to get the job as somebody with 90% of the prerequisites. And if you're a woman, you only need 30%. See, what so often happens is that we get in our minds and we think, oh, I need to check off every single box. And if one of those boxes isn't checked off, we think to ourselves, well, I'm out. I couldn't possibly be a good fit for this role. And we stop right there. But Phil, I think you bring up a great point, is that if we can put ourselves out there and recognize, yeah, we may not have all the experience in the world, people will give us a shot if they like us in a genuine way.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. The way to get connected, though, is really the interesting thing. So I see a lot of applicants go to these sites and they just, man, I filled out 100 applications this week, and nothing happens because these application sites everybody already knows this. They're running, they may call them AI tools. They might not be legit AI, but they have some level of intelligence. They're scanning for keywords. They're scanning for other things to understand whether these are spam applications from somebody. whether they really have the skills or the potential to fit the job description. So right away, there's 80 or 90% of the applications just filtered by a computer. The other 10 to 20 get to an HR department, not to the hiring manager. So I don't know if everyone out there understands the difference between what human resources does in the hiring process versus a hiring manager. Is that worth going into?
Yeah, I love it. Can you explain that?
Absolutely. So a traditional way, if you went to Boeing, website, and they have a job area where you can apply for certain jobs, those jobs get screened by a computer, and a lot of them get kicked in the trash, and then a certain percentage go to a human resources representative. That person's going to be looking for suitability and fit. So if you only had 1 year experience and the job description said 5 years of experience is required, they will probably just cut you out of the mix right away. So what the human resource person is trying to do is help save some time. They're acting in an administrative role for the hiring manager. So it may be the director of accounts payable at Boeing, and someone's trying to get some accounting job in accounts payable as a foot in the door. That accounting or the accounts payable director relies on human resources to send only the best of the best applications and potentially resumes and cover letters. That way they only have to sort through maybe 15 of them and interview 10 candidates from that and start to find their ideal candidate. The hiring manager, though, doesn't realize the HR rep or the computer filtering process may have kicked out a really great candidate that only had 2 years experience instead of 5, or maybe even is straight out of university. So being able to get directly to the hiring manager is what the networking allows us to do. If you're a friend of mine and you've just graduated from university and you say, Phil, dude, I have this degree, I'm having some trouble finding work. Can you refer me to anybody? I make a warm introduction to you to somebody who I know may be a hiring manager. So now I go to, John Schmann, and I say, Garrett Mintz is looking for a job in such and such. This guy's a great young guy. He's full of energy, he's full of ambition. And, and I can tell he's got a solid work ethic. So all of a sudden I'm kind of testifying on your behalf how great you are to a friend of mine, and that's a friend of mine. So there is sort of they kind of owe it to me to at least let Garrett get in front of him. And then it's on you in the interview. If you can pull off an interview, you've just made a warm introduction and you bypass the computer filter, you bypass the human resources filter for the time being. Human resources comes in on the back end again. Once the hiring manager says, hey, I like Garrett, I want to present him an offer, that's when they do the background check, all of the other things. They could do credit checks, they could do drug screening, they could do a lot of things to vet you again as a candidate.
That is so fascinating. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've got 2 stories that I can immediately think of it. I mean, one, my fiance she and I moved to Austin, Texas over the summer in the middle of the teeth of the pandemic. Jobs were not necessarily the easiest thing to come by. But what she did that was unique and set herself apart was she would reach out to people on LinkedIn and have conversations just to learn a little bit more about their work. And one of the people that she reached out to and connected with was the chief operating officer for the company that she's working at now. And she built a strong relationship, and that developed over time. And then 2 weeks later, he said, hey, would you be open to coming in for an interview? We're looking for a new director of marketing and events. And now she's got the job. And that's exactly how that happened. But I loved your other story on HR, because not only is HR relevant for getting jobs, but also for businesses that work with HR. Like, for example, our business and Ambition Emotional, a lot of times we will work with HR. And right before this recording, I just got out of a conversation with HR, but that conversation was brokered by the CEO of the company. Essentially, the CEO had met with me and said, this is really cool. I think we should do this. Connected me with their director of HR. And first things the HR director said was, we already have a mentor program. And I said, that's incredible. But I know that Mason, your CEO, connected us for a reason. I'd love to learn a little bit more about your mentor program. And as we dig in a little bit deeper, we realize that there are some opportunities that we provide in terms of a data and a technology perspective and a structure perspective that might be able to augment and help with that. But my relationship from Mason, who made the introduction to the director of HR, is what brokered the conversation and allowed
us to have the conversation in the first place. Because had I reached out to the director of HR immediately, I would have probably been axed, because she would have said, hey, we already have a mentor program. But the point I'm really trying to get at is that as a student, as you're reaching out for your job opportunity and offer, it might be wise, it might behoove you to reach out to the person who might be your manager in that role, the hiring manager, not necessarily the HR person, because they will pass you through if they like you. Is that kind of where you're getting at, Phil?
Yes, for sure I am. In your situation where you spoke with the HR representative or the HR director, it's pretty tough for that HR director to say, we already have a mentor program, we're not interested, when you're saying, well, I spoke to your CEO and your CEO told me to talk to you about this, right? So that makes it a little more challenging for the HR director to just kick you out the curb. And, they get pitched all the time. So as it relates to the job, keep in mind too, you may not be networking with the hiring manager, right? I know you're aware of this, but it might be that one of your parents or an uncle or your neighbor or a friend. I find some professors are connected okay. A lot of professors are really connected in academia, and they don't have a lot of great connections in the hiring world, unless it's another university. But again, that's not always true. I don't want to completely generalize, but there will probably be people outside of your university leadership that you've been living with for so long and looking up to. Now you need to start looking outside. Again, parents, relatives, friends, family, neighbors, and ask them if there's anybody they know. Because sometimes it's a neighbor might ask me, well, look, I'll give you a great example. This is a real story. My neighbor is a very high paid, he's an AWS developer, so Amazon Web Services. And those folks make a lot of money. He's a legit engineer and a developer, and he lost his job with a company, and they had just moved to Austin too, in a fairly expensive neighborhood with an expensive home. And he mentioned it to me that he lost his job and he was pacing the floors night and day. He was really frightened by it, I'd say, and he didn't know what to do. And I just called a few of my contacts, and that's all it took. Because they know me and they respect me and we have a relationship, they were willing to take a call from him and review his resume. It got him a few job interviews. And this is honest, it doesn't always work this well, but within a week of an introduction that I had given him to one person, a CIO in Houston, that CIO had given him a job offer that was better than the salary he was making in the job that he'd lost. He didn't really want to commute to Houston, and he used that job to leverage another job here in Austin, which kind of put me in a bad place. So he didn't necessarily do the right thing with that. You have to be careful, but it did work. That was the story was it worked. And I didn't have a job to offer him, but I knew somebody who might, or that person who I knew might know somebody who might.
That's a great story. I think there's multiple layers in that story. I think you're talking about what it means to be a genuine networker, and I think you clearly exuded that. But I also think you've also showed, potentially how somebody might abuse that. So I think that this sheds light into the inside. I think there are some students that come in with the mentality of like, I can't believe anybody would make an introduction. Maybe they've got a pessimistic viewpoint of the world, and they think like people might act in a way that might make them look bad. And so therefore they'd be surprised because if somebody else were to do the same for them, or the flip side where they're thinking like everybody should connect me. I mean, I've only had positive experiences connecting with people. And I think you shed light on the fact that sometimes people can make other people look bad, and they're not consciously doing that, or they're not clearly communicating to that other person. Because I would imagine, had this neighbor of yours communicated to your colleague out in Houston and said, hey, I am so grateful for the offer. This is an incredible role. This is an incredible scenario. My struggle is the commute to Houston. I don't know if I can make that work for, let's say, my family. And I bet if he would have been more potentially upfront about his concerns, as opposed to just leveraging it to get another offer and kind of leaving your friend in the dust, it probably would have salvaged the relationship in a whole lot more positive of a way.
I think so. I was actually surprised at my friend wanting the guy to commute to Houston. That doesn't make any sense anymore. This friend of mine has been in technology for a long time. It was super surprising that he wanted him physically present. So I don't know what that was about. Um, moving on from that story, one of the things in that story, the layers, by the way, is it's actually the layers. So I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a lady who knows a guy, right? It happens. It really happens. So it never hurts. When you network with somebody, ask them if they know anyone who might help you, even if they don't have something to offer you or don't know of a person who most certainly has some potential job. They still might know somebody who will know somebody. So you kind of keep that in mind when you're encouraging your network contact. If you could help me to even think of somebody who might know somebody. So
yeah,
yeah.
I think that's awesome. I'd love to ask I'd love to take a moment to ask the students a question. Have you ever share it with us in the comment section, a story, a time that your network helped you land some form of opportunity. Maybe you're in a fraternity or a sorority and your connection to that friend helped you get into that fraternity or sorority. Or perhaps there was a class that you applied to get into and maybe you didn't meet the initial criteria, but you followed up with the professor and it allowed you to get your foot in the door. How has potentially leveraging your network helped you gain opportunities? Post in the comment section. I think it would be really reaffirming and uplifting to see other students' stories of how they've been able to leverage their network. But Phil, I'd love to ask you, how has your network impacted your own career trajectory?
It's a great question. My very first job out of school, so I was a physics major and a math minor, but I didn't like academia, so I didn't go on for the doctorate. And being in that area, you really need a doctoral degree to do anything with that particular degree, specifically with that particular degree, at least at the time that I was exiting school. So it was about who I know. And I ended up in a marketing services company of all things, right? But the really crazy thing is how much that shaped who I was. So there's another thing to be thinking about. Sometimes that first job is a good job because you get your legs, you get a good couple of years. I always try to encourage everybody, try to last 2 years in any job. You can make your own happiness anywhere. Try to last 2 years in any job and try to learn everything you can. Because if the job is really not your ideal job, I know we're off the topic of not networking, but if it's not your ideal job, you will be able to springboard from that job, especially if you perform well. So back to how the network helped. It was about who I knew for my first job, and then a big career transition that I made in my second job was also about someone I knew. In fact, it was this friend I referred my neighbor to. He got me my second job. So look at that, 200 years later, right? He's helping someone else get a job. So that was really interesting. And it really goes on from there. My mentor, a CIO mentor, I'm in the technology world. My CIO mentor ended up getting 3 different jobs for me over my lifetime. All of them were big advancements, both in title and responsibility and salary and total comp. So they were all really great jobs and they were really great opportunities. I grew a lot from them. I was serving well in that capacity, and therefore he wanted me on his team. So that's important too. That networking thing sometimes works just from who is your manager or your director or your mentor in an organization. In fact, Garrett, the horizontal mentoring thing is huge because you never know. If I'm a computer programmer in a bank and I meet somebody who's a marketing analyst in a horizontal mentoring program, that marketing analyst may leave the bank and go somewhere else, but we forged a relationship and that person becomes important to me later when I'm looking for a job because they say, I want to tell you about this guy who I work with in the bank. He'd be a good programmer here at our company now. So, it just, the network is power.
One thing that you go over, but I really feel like not enough people are I don't think enough people might be picking up on this, but you are so genuine you're so generous with your connections and introductions. And I think there's so much value to that because for you, it's not necessarily reciprocation. Like somebody might have helped you and you may not have been able to necessarily reciprocate because that other person didn't need anything per se. But your willingness to help other people out and pay it forward to another person, I think really shows the power of being able to connect people. Because I think some people think to themselves, some people have a growth mindset, some people have a scarcity mindset. Some people have this mentality that, you know what, if I give out this introduction, that's one less introduction I can make to this person. And therefore, I don't know if I want to waste that on you. And that is a scarcity mindset. A growth mindset comes with the mentality that, hey, by connecting people together, I can help other people grow and succeed and thrive. And that makes me feel good because ultimately they've got a positive feeling towards me because I was able to make that connection. And I think you've really exuded that growth mindset mentality because you've made so many connections for other people, even throughout your story that you've been sharing tonight, of just how it comes back to you. And sometimes it doesn't come back to you directly from that person. Sometimes it's just the relationship that builds and grows over time. And I think there's so much power to that. I think students who are watching, they might think, like I'm going to ask for the introductions, but I don't know if I'll make the introductions. And I think that's a poor mindset. I think if you could work to make the introductions, even if it's not from somebody who introduced you, I think that's something so critical to your own growth and your own ability to be a genuine networker. Would you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, it's really the challenge in scarcity versus growth that you described is what happens if you get pushed up to the point where I have a job opportunity that I can interview for, but I also know somebody else would be really a good candidate for this job too. If I recommend to the hiring manager that I think I'd be a good candidate for this position, but I also want you to know Garrett Mintz would be a great candidate as well. And I want to give you his contact information because everything I've learned here today, man, there is so much power in that. But that is a scary moment there because you're about to give up something that you think you had in the bag and you're going to refer somebody else who may outperform you in an interview or even in the position. And honestly, we're talking about job interviews, right? And this is about the candidate and the hiring manager both trying to understand, is this a good fit? I would hate for anybody to interview for a job just in a desperate situation and take the job because they could get it. We really should be looking for form and fit to ourselves too. We want to make sure it's a team chemistry that's going to work for us. We want to make sure that the hiring manager seems like someone who will be a good leader and a good mentor for us as we develop our just specific career talent and skill set, right? So otherwise, on the genuine networking thing, it's a constant. But I'm going to say, I think I have a skewed mindset in this. Boy, I don't even know if I should say it this way. Gosh, it sounds it sounds a little ego-centered or something. But I care a lot about. This is even an awkward word in a business setting or whatever, but I care a lot about loving other people. So I think we're called, if you don't want to call it love, there is another thing. I mean, our company is about being a light in the world, and that comes from the values that are in the core of who I am. And being a light in the world means building other people up. So in a networking situation as well, I want to make sure I build other people up. How am I building someone else up? Because it will always come back. But there's value. You'll get value. Just if it doesn't come back, you'll get value knowing you build somebody up, right? It's like a feel-good moment where you did something that helped somebody else. So building other people up is an important thing. It's a way to create, not destroy. And there's already too much destructive kind of energy or things in the world, right?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, selfishly on my part, I get to facilitate hundreds, thousands of mentor relationships. It's an incredible opportunity that I've been able to do because I get to connect all these people together. So I can absolutely double down and attest to the power of just connecting people together because there are so many things that happen when you just connect two people together for a bond that allows them to grow and develop because they are in turn grateful that you help connect them. And it's there's a lot of power to that. And it does come back in mysterious ways sometimes.
Absolutely. So, I am a mentor mentee in your program, and Brian and I have made some serious like soul brother connections. I mean, we're in this relationship for life already and have benefited both one another.
One thing I want to talk about on this subject is having deep, intentional conversations. I think for a lot of students, they may have a conversation with somebody and they may end up realizing, okay, this person may not be able to introduce me to somebody, and this person may not have a job or an internship opportunity. How, when there's nothing that I have naturally to tangibly in the moment based on what I can see to gain from it, how can I still network in a genuine way? What can I do to build a deeper bond, to really just get to know somebody and connect with somebody on a human level?
Oh man, that's really tough. And one reason it's tough is it's just in some people it's really instinctive. It just happens. I have, for some reason, developed this fascination with everybody's story. Garrett, from the first time I met you and your team, I had a lot of interest in your story and what you were doing, because every person's story, we can learn from it. So when you have a genuine interest in someone's story, you're going to dig in there. You're going to be actively listening. So there are times when somebody is telling me what they're doing, I'll stop them for a minute and interrupt, which sounds it sounds counter to what I'm saying, but I'm interrupting to ask them to clarify something, because I really want to know. I don't want to just glaze over some point they made that I believe is important about their story. So wanting to discover other people's stories is a huge part of it for me in the model that I used.
That's some serious Dale Carnegie right there. Genuine curiosity in somebody else's story. People love to talk about themselves. Students, I think if you're hearing this and you're thinking to yourself, how do I build a genuine relationship with somebody? Ask them about them. Ask them to tell you their story, because people love to share their story. That's one of the core tenets of Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a great book if you haven't read it. But yeah, I think you hit it on the head. I think that's such a great insight, great wisdom. If you're thinking to yourself, geesh, I don't know if there's anything I can get from this person, I don't know if there's anything I can do to help with them, just taking a keen curiosity in what they're doing and how they're doing is so super critical. I think the thing to add on to that is I was listening to this podcast. It was an interview with the producer of the TV show called Billions. It's got Paul Giamatti. It's a good show. It's, I think, on HBO. But one of the things that he said was he was finding himself in a rut. He's finding himself in a rut because when he would chat with other people, he'd be so consumed with his own world, he would not really give much credence to what other people were doing. And then somebody kind of gave him some insight, almost like hit him like upside the head. And his realization was that everybody chooses to spend the time that they have in the way that they're doing it because they thought that was the best way to utilize the time they have at that given moment in time. And so the best thing we can do to support others and make them feel validated is to treat them like as if the decisions they have made are awesome. Say, hey, whatever you're doing, that's awesome. Because you want to know what? You thought that was the best decision for you in the given moment in time. I'm not in your shoes. I can't necessarily maybe relate to your circumstance, but I can support you and say that's incredible. And how else can I do to support you? And what can I do to learn more about what's going on in your world? I thought that was, just maybe one add-on thing was treating others as if what's going on in their world's awesome.
I like it. I think one thing, there's a real interesting nuance here when you really want to dive into someone else's story and learn about them, because we can learn about ourselves when we do that. But there's sort of a fear of asking maybe a stupid question, or a fear of asking a socially awkward question. Sometimes it's as simple as saying, hey, Garrett, I don't know what you mean by horizontal mentoring, right? So can you help me understand? Because that sounds really interesting. And, so I wasn't afraid to ask that, right? The other thing is to sometimes I think we're trying hard to follow the Dale Carnegie script, and we end up overthinking, what should I ask as the next question? And actually, we're not listening. When we can just be genuine and have a conversation like you and I are right now, it works much better. It flows much better. We find ourselves more and more comfortable with practice. We find ourselves more and more comfortable digging in deeper, and people appreciate it.
You know what? That makes me think of a question I'd love to ask the students. What is a story that you've heard from somebody else? When was the last time you heard somebody else's story, and what was that story? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about it. I think what this exercise does is it forces you to think about, when was the last time I learned about somebody else's story? And by the way, it doesn't have to be their full life story. It could be their day or their week or their month or just a catch up with a friend, but where you took time to intentionally listen to what is going on in the world. What was that story about? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about it. I think that's just a great test in just active listening and genuine curiosity. So Phil, I'd like to transition a bit to this notion, because I think you're right. There's a lot of students that think to themselves, oh, what is my next question going to be? But a lot of them won't even get started because they fear that they're just going to get shut down before they even get started. In your experience, are people generally helpful?
Well, run that by me again.
In your experience, are people generally helpful? Because I think there's a lot of students that won't even put themselves out there because of fear of getting rejected. Like, oh, well, if I like this is something that, it depends on your mentality, but this is something that I'll give an example. So when my fiance and I were younger and we were dating, our favorite band came to our campus to play, and we had tickets, and we were kind of sitting outside the front, and we didn't know when the doors opened to get into the concert. And her natural instinct is just to like look on her phone, look it up online, don't ask anybody, why ruffle anybody's feathers, why rock the boat? And I, being a little more boisterous, was like, I see people coming out of this tour van. I'm going to go up and ask them and say, hey, what time do the doors open? And oh, by the way, how did we meet the bands? And turns out they were like, did you just see what we put in our pocket? And I said, no. And they just whip out 2 lanyards and gave it to us. We got backstage passes to meet like our favorite band, just because I was willing to ask. The point I guess I'm making in all of the stories that sometimes people don't ask for fear of rejection or fear that it's going to be a waste of time. Why is it not a waste of time to reach out to people? Why is it not a waste of time to reach out to people?
Okay, good question. First of all, it never hurts to ask, right? It never hurts to take a chance at talking or connecting with a person. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? That person's going to say, hey man, we don't have time right now. We got to get the stage set up, or we got to get the band, or we're security. You need to be back over in the line, whatever. That there was no harm from that. There was only opportunity. There was only upside. They're not going to arrest you. So, we have to remember that, but we can get butterflies and fear in our hearts. If the speaker after a conference and we want to talk to that speaker, and that speaker's pretty well-known and popular, and there's a line of people waiting and blah, blah, right? But still to be able to go up and talk to that speaker, they're there for that reason, and they want to talk to other people. But it may not be a speaker. It could just be anyone. In a coffee shop, you can, oh, that's so-and-so, whatever. Anybody, you can always take the chance. If they're too busy, usually they're going to be polite about it. They're not just going to be haughty and mean. So there's really very little risk. So I would say really try to suppress that fear. And again, it's a practice thing. Practice sometimes doing the least comfortable, right? I'd love to talk a little bit more about practice in this space, because I think it's an important thing to exercise at the age of, the collegiate student.
I love that. Yeah, let's jump in. Can you share with us a little bit more about what it means to practice? And maybe while you're gathering your thoughts on that, I'd love to ask the students another question. Who was somebody that you were nervous to reach out to, but reached out to anyways, and something positive happened? Who was that person? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about that. Whether it be backstage passes for a concert, whether it be a guest speaker or a speaker you saw at a conference, whether that be an employer or professional you reached out to on LinkedIn that you thought was way above you, a CEO of a company. Post in the comment section. Who was somebody that you thought was way out of your league, or what I've had my friends call to me before, punching above your weight class, and actually turned out to be the nicest person and helped you out in some way or another? Post in the comment section. I'd love to learn about that. But Phil, talk about practicing. I'd love to learn more about how we can practice genuine networking, or just general outreach to people that we think are way above us.
For sure, absolutely. And way above us or not. The thing is, practice in having a genuine interest in someone else's story is a really great place to start. And you can start in a university setting, because you're surrounded by students from all parts of the world, probably in most universities, certainly all parts of North America. So, there's a lot of interesting things about every student. So find a student, sit down at a table if you're eating somewhere with a group that you don't normally sit with, or with somebody who's sitting alone, and try and ask them, is it all right if I sit here, and just ask them where they're from, what's their major. It's fascinating just to understand what people are majoring in and why, what drove them to do that, what's it like in their program. A lot of things are really interesting from other people, and we always learn something, man. We always pick something up when we hear someone else's story. So you could start right in the university setting. It doesn't have to be somebody who is austere, or we look up to them. It can be just one of your peers. Learn their story, practice learning a story, practice that active listening where, oh, you're from this state, I've never been there, what's it like? Or I hear the winters are harsh, whatever. You're engaging in a dialogue with some dialogue, as opposed to just opening it for a monologue from this person. So there's the first place to start, is university. When you get out of university, you're probably going to have opportunities to go to conferences, or any kind of, meetups and other things happen all the time, and they're professional. You can go to these as a university student. You can go to meetups that are, a group of, again, it could be accountants or marketing people or whatever, who are meeting up in a town, and they have a regular get together in a networking session, usually before and after. They're usually a sandwich, right? You know this, Garrett, you've done this probably a million times. You got a sort of networking period in the beginning that maybe is 30 minutes long, and sometimes they'll have an open bar or something, right? But they just want people to mingle and get to know one another. Then they have a speaker, and then they usually, after the speaker, they're encouraging people to network for a period of time, and then they want to shut the place down, right? A couple of things to practice, and these are the hard things. The easy one is, look for somebody at a conference like this after the speaker, and you'll start to notice little groups form of, say, 2 to 6 people. You'll get little circles, pockets of people talking around the room. But you'll notice one person, you'll notice more than one single person standing for a little while looking awkward. And if you don't get to them quickly, they're going to leave, because they're the person who hasn't practiced, and they're uncomfortable, and they're not in a group now. So they're an easy target to go up to them and just say, hey, what brought you to the conference? What do you do for a living? Oh, you're still in school. What are you studying? You start to understand what their story is. By the way, most people will share for a certain period of time before suddenly they realize, I've been doing all the sharing, and this person's genuinely interested in me. Tell me more about you. And then it becomes more of a dialogue, and you're sharing stories. So just being confident in who you are and being benevolent toward other people, I think really helps. So that's another way to practice in a more professional as opposed to university realm. The more advanced trick then, and I used to force myself to do this at the advice of an early mentor. When you go to a networking event like this after the speaker, the groups have already formed, and they become hard to penetrate because they are circles. Their backs are to the room from every direction. But to squeeze into a group of 2 or 3 or 4 people and just say, hey, I'm Phil Boyer. I work for blah, blah. And I just showed up here tonight to meet some people. Do you mind if I join your group? That's it. That's challenging. That you can feel the butterflies usually when you've not done that a lot. But it's amazing how a lot of groups are pretty open to that. Sometimes you'll notice personalities in the group, 1 or 2 people, they feel like you've invaded this space that had some momentum, but do it anyway. We're all human, we should allow other people in. You could also practice if you're in one of those groups and you spot somebody, just wave them over and say, hey, what did you come to the conference for? Something, just practice those things.
That's a great lesson, Phil. I love it. That's really good. This is really good insight. Those are really great tangible tips. I love the tip on, if you see someone looking awkward and uncomfortable, like they don't have that person, go up to them and chat with them, because they are the prime target. I think that makes a ton of sense. I loved the tip on just going up to people and just having that conversation, because you never know what you'll find out. It makes me think of one of our early projects when we were only on Indiana University's campus. Was we created this marketing program called Humans at IU. Essentially, it was a takeoff of Humans of New York, but where we interviewed random students across campus to share their story of what they're pursuing, what they're studying, what career they're pursuing, that sort of thing. And actually, one of our interns, I think, ended up meeting his inevitable girlfriend through that. He just struck up a conversation with a girl reading a textbook in the union, and would have never gone up to her otherwise. And yeah, I think they ended up started dating, which is kind of cool. Like, I didn't even think about like those additional, outplays from that, but it's like almost like the excuse to go and talk to somebody creates that social connection that can allow people to bond and build deep relationships.
That's great. Another thing that comes to mind is, and this might be a little awkward, but I think sometimes we will pick the pretty people. It could be the way they're dressed. It could be the way they look. We'll pick people who look like us, right? So sometimes we don't cross racial boundaries or cultural boundaries. And sometimes we don't even cross gender boundaries or gender identity boundaries, right? There are a lot of things that we sometimes will stay in a certain box. And it's really great to practice that too. There are just amazingly wonderful, brilliant, engaging, legit human beings that fall in all categories. So it's important to try to avoid that too. One other thing I was going to mention as well in the networking process, or when you're trying to understand or hear somebody's story and you want to be genuine, the last thing you really want to be doing is looking around the room and you're sending a message, looking at your watch. I get sometimes if it's going too long, you may want to do that just so that you can create a way out. But normally, if you are trying to genuinely understand some of the story, they're going to pick up on signals very fast if you're paying attention to a lot of other things. You either really are interested in them or you're not. So go into that with the expectation that I'm going to commit 5 to 10 minutes of my time digging deeply into, as deep as I can in 5 to 10 minutes, into another human being and their story, and let it influence me. And if it's interesting to both of you, the 5 to 10 minutes could end up being, I've shut down places. I've had, the cleanup crews asking us to leave because I had to lock up before, just in conversations with people that were fascinating. I grew from them. I benefited from them. And in some cases, established great relationships, friendships for life.
That's amazing. Phil, this is incredible wisdom, incredible stories. Thank you so much for sharing this with our audience. I know a lot of our audience are on LinkedIn. My last question is, how can our audience connect with you? Are you all right if they connect with you on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can put my LinkedIn contact in the comments if you want. That I'm happy to have people connect with me. I'm always happy to give back if I can. Absolutely.
Any final and parting wisdom for our audience, for our students?
Oh man, that's such a tough question. So no, I think we've covered some great ground here on genuine networking, not networking where we're looking for something necessarily, right? I really appreciate the topic. I think it's super timely for students. I guess the only wisdom to add is all you students are amazing people. And some of you believe that and understand that more than others. Some of you maybe understand that too much. Some of you probably understand it too little, and you don't give yourself enough credit. You don't believe in yourself enough. And this practice of genuinely networking, connecting with other humans, it could help you with your self-esteem. So be confident, be bold, go out there and connect with people, because you are awesome, great people.
Amazing. Phil, you're incredible. That was great wisdom. Students, thank you all for being here. Phil, thank you for being here. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. See everybody.
Thanks, Garrett.